All right, so I have with me here a dear friend of mine, kind of a every man's man. Military background, business owner, dad, MMA fighter, kind of done a little bit of everything. Eddie, or should I say Eduardo Diaz.
Yeah,
So,
man, it's nice to be here.
bro, I really wanted to talk to you because of all those things. Like, you're just one of these well-rounded individuals, and I'm lucky to have a group of friends of guys that are pretty well-rounded dudes, and I figured we put your story out there and can talk about your whole life cycle, because especially when I think about our friends, like, bro, like military background to using that and parlaying that into tech and doing different things. And a lot of times, like growing up as kids, they always told us like, oh, you have to go to college, you have to go to college, you have to go to college. And you use the military to get an education that honestly is the equivalent or better than most college degrees nowadays, because like the field that you're in is now so important. Um,
Yeah,
but
man,
yeah,
it
take it
was a
from there.
crazy ride. Yeah, I kind of go through all that. Military, my bunch of people in my family were military. My dad was Navy, my uncle was Army, my older stepbrother was Marines, and they all told me to join the Air Force. So that's where I went. And still, like in IT, one of my biggest strengths has been troubleshooting. And I got my troubleshooting base in the Air Force. I did all the avionics on the F-16 fighter jets.
Oh
So
man,
they built like some very strong troubleshooting techniques, and still you kind of translate that over to IT, and it's been pretty awesome.
nice. What a lot of you guys don't know is Eddie also is the first in our friends group to try and teach us what cryptocurrency was. Yeah, when Bitcoin was a lot
Oh man,
cheaper. Oh
I
my
would have been way
god.
richer if I didn't, listen to you guys. You guys would tell me I was crazy.
Well, you know what I think the biggest thing was is you were trying to explain to us like the mining
Right.
of it, which to be honest, I still don't really understand. Like, still am not that guy. But I think if you would have just been like, "Hey, bro, just put $1,000 in this and leave it alone,"
Well, I
I
didn't
would
know
have been
back
like,
then either. Like it was so new to me, and really you kind of bounce things off people you know and look at their reactions. And so
mm-hmm.
many people's reactions was always like, "What are you talking about?" So
Well,
it had me skeptical at
like
first.
tell the people at about what dollar figure estimated that Bitcoin was at that you were telling us this.
Um, oh man, Bitcoin was about $1,000 or less, and I thought that was crazy, right? Because I was watching it come up from nothing, and it's like it's $1,000. This is crazy, and it quickly started escalating from there.
And then
But
Ethereum was in the
dollars,
yeah, the single digit range. Like, oh,
yep, yep,
still one of our biggest financial, not really a mistake, right? Because like, I mean, it is what it
yeah.
is. Some of us made a little bit of money, but none of us rode the wave all the way through. None of
No, I
us.
don't think any of us saw like what was coming with it and what's capable. Um, Stuff started happening really fast, but yeah, crypto has been interesting, and right now we're kind of in the middle of that bear market and
Hmm.
seeing things slow down and seeing different regulations come down. So it's going to be interesting to see like what the future holds for cryptos and different types of cryptos.
Yeah, I know the big thing you always told me, and it's like something I always think about when I think about crypto, was like usability. Like, is the coin actually doing something? Which
Right,
so like I still have money in like Brave token because I still use the browser
right.
even now, because it's I was this is something tangible, like it's doing something, like, and so things like that I've always found like add more value than just like, hey,
Yeah, that
a
one was
money
always like
transfer
a
platform.
great intro to tell people about the use case because it was so like easy. Like right away, it was a useful browser that blocked ads, so people like that already. then the background of the person who built that coin, right? He's,
Oh yeah, the
heavy
white
tech
paper is
background,
amazing.
JavaScript, Firefox guy, that one was really really easy. But some of these other ones, and NFTs came out. You had different programs coming out. Then you had all these scandals that kind of got people scared right now. But I still think
Yeah,
it's the future. I still think like a lot of things are going to go to a type of cryptocurrency. You know.
yeah. Everything that happened with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried kind of like made
Crazy.
crypto taboo. But a lot of people don't realize that it was just really the problem was what he was doing using FTX with Alameda, like
Right,
and
where that was a centralized company who took users' funds and did stuff illegal with them because you gave them your funds. That's also why I love Cardano so much, is like all the custody and stuff you hold, right? If you have a
yeah.
Cardano wallet and are staking, you hold access to all your funds. But people take that centralized company and what they did, and now they're scared of all crypto, and it's like, no, that's exactly what we're trying to get away from. That's the whole point of decentralization. So somebody can't do that to your funds. You have ownership of that. So it's going to take a while, though. That was a lot of money people lost.
I mean, but that's like now would be the best time to buy in theory, right? You when everyone else is selling or afraid, that's when you should dive all in,
That's
right?
what Warren Buffett says. When everybody looks left, you should
Go
look right.
right.
So
Yeah,
I still don't think the bottom's hit. I still think that there's ways to go down. I look at our economy and people are like, why does crypto follow the stock market and the economy? And it's like, to me, it's pretty self-evident. Like, well, if people have extra money because the economy's doing good, they're more likely to invest. If people are broke because eggs cost more than their mortgage or something, like they're going to be less likely to spend money or invest money in crypto or any investments, really. So,
no, it's so true. Like I read a stat the other day that like the average amount that people have in savings has decreased 200% in the past 90 days, and it's just that's that's self-generated, right? That was, we were in an inflated market, and
yeah,
so they were trying to deflate it. I mean, we're only going to see, just like with the whole shutdown thing, we're only going to see the repercussions of this later on, right? Like, we don't know exactly what the repercussions are going to be. The crazy thing is, like, I think part of what they were trying to do was also slow down, like, my business in particular, like in the automotive industry. But
okay,
they still didn't solve, like, the most basic form. And I feel like they haven't solved it really in real estate either. The most basic form in all economics is supply and demand. And like because of the '08 shutdown, a lot of new home buyers, major new home builders, completely like were wiped out. So we don't have the type of new home inventory to really bring down pricing in the market. And then by the same token, now with like the COVID shutdowns and factories and rail workers, deciding in early retirement because of these shutdowns and all that
right,
stuff, like getting new cars is also it's like pulling teeth, man. So like it's the same supply and demand situation. So even though the same car would have cost you, $400 a month last month, and now this month is $700 a month, you still, if you need a car,
you're gonna get it.
you're still gonna buy it, and there's not enough supply to really temper demand. And I
Right. Well, that's the same thing that's happening with the firewall market. So I've had like projects just waiting, and we can't get firewalls and networking equipment fast enough for some like certain networking equipment. It's just everything's backed up. The whole supply chain for anything tech or chips is backed up. So I've had projects that have been hold for 9 to 10 months, just because we can't get the equipment. So that it's not going to be cheaper, right? Now people are
yeah, no.
fighting. The bigger projects are getting priority. The more you spend, the more priority you get. So, yeah, I just see it everywhere.
So is that the majority of what you do is like right now maintaining and like building up firewalls?
Yeah,
Again,
so
that's tech that's over my head.
yeah, so that's basically what I do. I'll set up firewalls and just the overall network of a company. Whether that's a baseball field, a bank, lawyers' offices, hotels, and I'll set up the network and I'll segregate it to keep things safe. Right? You don't want people on your connecting to your guest Wi-Fi and having access to all your administrative PCs or something like that. Right? So you need a
No, that makes
firewall in
sense.
between those networks to block that. The crazy thing is that a lot of these big hotels and companies that I've done, their security's terrible. Like half the reason why I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly why somebody got in. They didn't segment right, or their security rules were laxed. But nowadays you have to be tight on that stuff. There's so many regulations that came out with that. But yeah, it was just interesting. Actually, the bigger the company, the worse security they had.
I remember Mullinex got hacked at one time, Mullinex, Central Florida, and like they were trying to hold them ransom, like send it was something like send 500 grand of Bitcoin to X and X.
That's the dark side of crypto, right?
Yeah, and I was like, oh shit, if you send it, they can't track it. Right, like, and it became like a big thing. I think like there was a point where like FBI was involved in everything because it was people's personal information, let alone like company trade secrets. Yes, but like what the FBI was there was there's how many stolen identities. I mean, we're doing 700-ish cars a month, and that's people's. At
Yeah.
very least, you have everyone's driver's license, and if they finance with you, and normally the average rate that a dealership runs a finance percentage is right around 70 to 75%. So, like, man, you're talking about 550 to 570 people's identity per month, and I don't know how deep or how much information they got, but I'm sure they got
They got a
plenty. I
bunch.
mean,
Yeah. Well, that's how
yeah.
those like dark web things do that. They'll get a bunch of identities and then sell those off at bulk to let people
Oof.
do whatever they want to
Whatever.
do. Right? That's how they found, on the dark web, and it's all crypto. For a while there, people thought Bitcoin wasn't traceable. FBI and a bunch of people has actually found ways to trace Bitcoin. So now what they do is they'll get Bitcoin or whatever, transfer it to Monero or some other privacy coin. And then once you get a privacy coin, there's no way to trace that. It's like in the
Yeah, I
protocol.
guess that's the whole purpose of it is to be untraceable.
Right.
Interesting. That's man. I guess it's just like anything. Like there's benefits to being decentralized, right? Because like think about it. I could be in Australia and get money transferred to me, like that. Whereas before it would take. I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that transferring money like overseas, because having like gone to Europe and different places, like getting money transferred to you is a bitch, and it
Oh yeah.
costs money, and it costs like it wasn't cheap. Like you're gonna spend $50 to $100 to transfer $1,000. It's like 10%.
Right. And that's the other thing too. The systems that ran that, like the programming languages, and so they were all very old. Those systems were very slow to change. Matter of fact, they didn't. Right. That's kind of why crypto and all this technology started coming out. Is how do we come to consensus? Because all a cryptocurrency is a database. So think of like Excel, but if Excel was just one, parallel, and every transaction is another block. And then miners and everybody in the network, we all verify that, hey, you have block number 5 is this transaction? Yes, yes. Everybody has consensus. And so that's why you can't hack the network, because the network itself secures itself. So it's just a secure way to create a database. This is why people believe it's going to help with identity theft, right? If there's a way you could tie your identity to a block, it's going to be harder to crack that. The problem is stuff like this FTX is when people get tricked. They think they're investing in crypto and it's really some centralized company, and then they do whatever
Yeah,
they
it's
want.
it's
So there's
actually
more
not
leaks.
crypto, but
Yeah,
it's giving crypto a bad name because of it's marketing itself as crypto.
right.
So I guess it's
Well, I
just
mean,
like
it
anything.
was. They had their own coin, but again, they made all the custody on themselves, right? So they took all your coins. It's kind of what happened with Celsius, with BlockFi. It kind of all got tied into FTX because FTX was basically investors in those companies. But in Celsius's case, the judge ruled that in those terms of service, when you gave Celsius that crypto, it was no longer yours. So in Celsius's case, they actually did everything legally right. You actually accepted that. What FTX did on the back end was way shadier than that. He went against his own terms of service and was moving funds on the back end as the programmer being able to do that. Yeah.
Do you think he's gonna see any like actual jail time?
I think he has to, but I don't know. He got like rich, parents and connected to the DNC and all kind of craziness. That was a fun rabbit hole to go down.
Oh yeah, for sure. Man, and just it's crazy because like he was one of the biggest DNC investors, but he was also one of the biggest Republican investors too. It was his partner's name, so obviously like hey, we're just greasing both sides of the wheel, which I mean that's a whole nother aspect of like the problem with the two-party system, that it allows for things like that to actually coexist. That's a problem in and of itself because none of that represents any form of people.
Right. Yeah, that's the weird part about it is most people that I talk to kind of believe. Like, I haven't met somebody that's 100% Republican and doesn't have one belief that's on the left side. Like, there's always a mix, but they make everything so polarized. They have you believe in the world's like totally divided. Meanwhile, no, we all kind of land in the middle somewhere. There's definitely conservatives and people who are more left-leaning, but on major issues, we kind of all land near the middle.
And you know what's crazy? Like if you look in like even like from the 60s all the way to like the early 90s, most presidential candidates were, for their parties, considered centralists. So like they were, if you were a Republican, you were considered a left-leaning Republican. If you were a Democrat, you were considered a right-leaning Democrat. Like you were a centralist. Like
Right.
because honestly, like, and I think the parties thought that the guy that is most reflective of the other side could then capture more votes. And I think in the 90s, when you had like the Clintons and them come in that were, so far towards one side, what ended up happening is they realized if they polarized their constituencies, if they polarized like their voting demographic, that they could then gain a majority in that sense because the guys that are, more middle ground will actually still stay with you type deal. And I think it's actually hurt us like as a country because like you said, like most people actually fall like closer to the middle than I feel like they fall to the extreme. But because we're so defined in like our roles of like, hey, there has to be two parties, so many people just vote one way without even thinking about it. Like they don't consider any consequences when I really feel like, I mean, the third party that doesn't exist, quote unquote, is probably a better representation of what our country actually wants.
Yeah, I mean, and then just hearing, I was listening to Jordan Peterson podcast the other day and hearing, um, somebody within the government talk about, what it was like being in the Democratic Party. As soon as you get elected official, it's not even, they said their whole job was to make money for the party and it was all about the party. Doesn't matter who got elected, the people behind you, everything you do is for the betterment of the party. And it's like, oh yeah, they get brainwashed right away and this is how you have to work in Washington type of thing. So I definitely think the system's broken, but even going back to Jordan Peterson, you see this just in like biblical writings. Like once a government's gotten so high, it'll lean to like corruption and tyranny, and then you'll have a falling of that government, and then a calling back to like basic principles of that nation. You see it in Israel. Israel falls and comes back up like 6 or 7 times because of that. So yeah, I think we're probably on that phase. We live in crazy times, and there's definitely corruption everywhere. To the point most people will believe exactly opposite of whatever the mainstream media said immediately.
How is that not like insane, right? Like I heard I love Jordan Peterson, by the way. I heard he was on Patrick McDavid's podcast, and he was talking about how a former chancellor, because he's from Canada, basically saying he has, this information about COVID and some mishandlings and da da da, and he wanted to talk about it on his podcast. And Jordan goes, "This sounds like something you should be saying on the news." To which, like, this guy basically tells him, like, "I would, but I don't trust any of them." And I'm like, "Oh my God. So it's not just here. Like, the problem with mainstream media, there's no, like, I remember, like, in the 90s everyone said, like, BBC and that stuff in Great Britain is, more educational and, real news type deal. But that's no longer the case. Like, everything is so polarizing depending on where you go. It just depends on what message you get, but it's a polarizing message, and it's not even like you're not trying to educate the masses. What you're really trying to do is indoctrinate them to one side or the other.
Do that, or even just like on these big tech, the way big tech's going is just to keep people's attention. Really, that seems to be the currency of the day, is to have people's attention and their time. Um, Everybody stays on their phone too much, right? We see what that does, and that they're going deep in that tech to keep you on there longer. But yeah, it's been really interesting to see just the corruption widespread everywhere. And one of the things you see is kind of like, and you see it in different areas. They talk about even craftsman jobs, trade jobs. Everybody's leaning towards corruption and not, almost like not doing things the right way. There's a natural order to things, and when people fall into corruption and out of that natural order, things tend to lessen. So just hearing that and hearing kind of the call to, be that person that's not that way, that doesn't fall into corruption, because it's everywhere. But we need that other side to kind of combat that, and I think that's where we're at. I think there's a movement of that going right now.
I think so too, and like, I think for a long time we listened to a very loud minority that tried to push a certain narrative or do or say certain things, and I feel like the majority is kind of like saying, like, "Hey, do what you want, but just don't change how I have to live my life based on how you want to live yours." Like, those are two different subjects. And just, man, more and more, I just go back to, man, I just want to raise my kids to be, wholesome dudes. Like, I've talked about this on here before. I've talked about it with a couple of our friends too. Like, bro, I want to raise my kids to be knights. Like, what knights were supposed to be, like, in not only in medieval times but in actual fairy tale. Like, hey, like, they don't need to wear armor or ride on a white horse, but those types of principles, that's what I want my sons to be. I want them to be knights, and I want them to, stand up for what's right. I want them to be strong. I want them to be strong of mind and strong of will and strong of faith, and I want to raise them to be knights. And, by all intents and purposes, then what I will want them to marry is kind of a princess, right? Like, you can't have one without the other. Like, and I don't mean princess as in spoiled, but I mean princess as in, you know, educated and polite and, have that, essence about her. So it's kind of weird because I don't know if that's going to exist by the time my nights are out there.
I don't know. That's very interesting. But yeah, even the call to that is like the call to adventure. Jordan Peterson would say, or like in the Knights of the Round Table, right, where they each had to go was the darkest part of the woods to them, and what that meant psychologically was that knights should face their fears forthrightly. So it's something to that, right? And then having that code of honor and stuff, and you see that in the Stoics, and but to me, it's all kind of trying to explain that same thing. What is that voice in our head? What is that? Some people call it the muse. Some people call it intuition. Some people call it Holy Spirit. But it seems like when you follow that, and it seems to be some unifying spirit between all people, that when you follow that, good things happen, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been interesting. I've been diving into a lot of the Stoic stuff, a lot of the Greek stuff, Socrates, and hearing a lot of that stuff. I see that through a Christian lens and see like, oh, we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much. But speaking of abuse and being motivated to do different stuff, so you went military, then tech, and I know you're still working in tech, but you also have a crazy cool side hustle that, personally, I don't know anyone else that, custom makes knives, but a pretty badass knife maker in your own right now. I mean, you've been
Thank
doing it
you.
for a
No, I
couple
appreciate
years now. I remember when you first started to
Yeah,
now what I see you doing, I'm like, holy hell.
yeah, no, that's a call to that as well. I think for me anyway. Obviously, I did the MMA stuff because I always loved fighting. I was super scared of it. But I don't know if I told you this story before, but like obviously you guys know me. I'm the big nerd of the group. And I loved gaming. So World of Warcraft, I was always, in every fantasy game, I was always a warrior blacksmith, right?
Huh.
So when the new update of World of Warcraft had came out, like some trash pants dropped that were better than my pants that I had spent fucking, I don't know, 8 months trying to get like rating in this game. And I was like, why am I spending all this time trying to make this fake character better? Like, what if I just spent that time on myself? And that really got me. I was like, I'm going to do MMA. I want to learn how to fight. And then in MMA, my next evolution was I always loved the knife making, and I started diving into that as almost like a transition to MMA. Because that's something hard to replace, right? Like, there's still nothing like getting ready for a fight, doing it, training with all of you guys.
The
I still say
brotherhood,
my
yeah.
best friends and the biggest bonds I made was my time training. And that's coming from, I did Air Force as well. I have bonds with a lot of my Air Force guys, but it was different when it was fighting. Like, we all got everything out. We helped each other out. We've been through a lot of stuff together, and it's something about suffering together that just builds bonds.
Oh, yeah, between like cutting weight together, and especially me, because for some reason I wanted to fight at 55. So, I mean, I cut so much weight. I remember, like, I needed like 2 or 3 months notice from Mitchell before I was going to take a fight because I was
Yeah.
walking around almost 190 pounds fighting at 155. But like, it's just everything from the Shark Tanks and, literally you're like walking into the gym today, like, yeah, I'm going to get fucked up today.
You get fucked up.
Fuck, I'm going to get fucked up. Shit. And then bringing in a fresh guy every minute and you just, just straight on getting to that point where, hey, I'm just gutting this
I
thing
learned
out.
so much from that shit though. And the good thing for me, so I was, some of you guys love, fighting and trained, and some of you guys, that was one thing cool about our group. Everybody kind of specialized in different areas and took to different areas, right? So, and because we trained with each other, we all kind of took those little things from each other, right? And iron sharpens iron type of thing. But going through that, I learned so much about one, how to learn, humility, and then like just building what you call it, friendships with people, and stuff. Like I said, suffering with people. It was one of the best times of my life. Just training with you guys and learning to be a martial artist. That's like Miyamoto Musashi. He talks about once you learn the way broad, you know it in all ways. So I learned like a bunch of stuff in martial arts that actually helped me with knife making. Kind of tying it back to the knife making thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it was a crazy transition to the knife making world. I found a good mentor. That was another thing that I found. Right, we had good mentors in the MMA side, and that helps. Right, like you just have an edge when you have those type of mentors, guys that've been there. And that's the one thing I was gonna say is training with you guys and then getting into my actual MMA fights. I was like, oh, it's so much easier taking this random dude down because I ain't taking none
Oh
of you.
yeah. Oh my God. That was like I remember and even like you taught me like some little like, cuz you had a little like cheap tricks that you were like, so you're like, "Hey man, look." And I remember like you'd pull me to the side, "Hey, instead of doing this, just step forward here. Step forward here." And I remember like I did one of those things that you told me and it was just like, "Hey, like just jump in, boom, jump out, jump in." And I remember it worked in my fight. And I was like, holy shit, I'm a striker. I was like, oh my God. And then right away I was like, nah, dump this guy. I'm taking you down. But I remember thinking like, holy, if I want to, I can bang. I can strike with this guy. He's not like, it ain't nothing crazy.
Yeah. You know, the one thing with me too, I felt like, you know, all you guys got finishes. All my fights went to freaking decisions. I don't feel that I ever got comfortable. You know, that whole thing where they say, you know, it's different on fight night than it is training. It, I definitely felt that, right? Like, I could never get over that anxiety. You know, I still won. I still, you know, did okay in certain fights. I had like flashes of good stuff, but
Still
I never
remember
got
that head kick.
comfortable where
Oh,
I was like, bro, every fight after the first round, I was dead. I was,
bro. And you know what's funny is I feel like I had the opposite with MMA. Every single one of my fights done in the first 2 3 minutes, all by finishes. Like I never, you know what my biggest regret is? I never got to sit in the stool. Like it's the stupidest thing, and I always told myself if I went in between rounds, like I wasn't gonna sit in there on purpose. But I never got to say no, I don't want the stool. Is that weird? Like it's just
hey,
something
that's a
in the
good
back of
problem
my
to have.
head. Like I just never did, and like part of me was like, man, maybe I should just try to drag one out. But then I go back to like, fuck that. Nah, this dude trained for a couple months to fight me. I trained for a couple months to fight him. I found a way to finish it. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Like that was just in my head, but I do think about that. So for all intents and purposes, to give you some relief, hey man, from a guy that finished everyone to a guy that didn't get any finishes, but you know clearly you did have success. I still remember you had this pretty dope head kick after you like during warm ups. You're like, I'm gonna head kick this guy right away. I'm like, oh my god, Eddie's crazy because you know I'm a grappler, so in my head I'm like, this guy's a lunatic. But hey, if you do it, just be ready, right? Like I'm trying to like build
Head
you up,
kicks were my favorite, even in training.
bro. It
When you
landed
land a head
so
kick, that's like
flush.
the best.
I think you were surprised at how easy it landed.
Yeah, I didn't expect it. And the crazy thing about that head kick was that was 100% Sosa, like, called it in between rounds. He said, I want you to throw the inside kick. When it comes back, straight to the head kick. And I was like, okay.
Yo,
Boom,
and
boom. Oh, shit, it worked.
Sosa, man, that guy was a legend. Speaking of great coaches, like every time I talked to him, I'm like, man, you know, I think I should start striking. Like, holy shit! Like, you leave there thinking like, boom, just like when I would go to Peachy's boxing pit with Jim, and
I never went
or
there.
he,
I heard a bunch of you guys say it was, you know, good training over
bro,
there.
or yeah, or Tommy came over from the UK a couple times to do boxing with us, or like Bill would hold pads for me. I remember thinking like, man, I'm a striker now. Like, holy shit, that felt so good. And then like the second I lock up with someone, I'm like, nah, it's time to
Nah, time to take that.
it's game time, bro. Like this is, but
Yeah, I
man,
started liking the striking, but man, the head kick was the best to me. If in striking, if you could land a head kick, that's like, I don't know, it was like the overhand right type of thing, the Hail Mary. I wish I would have got the knockout with it, but I got a knockdown. I'll take that.
oh yeah, it was clean. I remember just I turn and I look at Sosa. Holy shit! It was just
But
it was
I never got comfortable, and that's why I think what's so different in boxing is you have those guys that have like 100 amateur fights. So I feel like you figure that out, you know, like you start to
yeah. It doesn't
figure
become
out how
that
to get
anxiety
your
goes
nerves,
away.
right? Um, and then kind of go into that. But I knew for me, fighting, I did it way later in life. It was more like a challenge, like a Mount Everest to me, to even get in there and do anything. I wasn't doing it for like a career type of thing. But man, I had a hell of a time doing it and training with different people and you know all over the U.S. Right, really looking everywhere I went. Oh, there's a jiu-jitsu school I can go to. You know,
And then you kind of have like a built-in like semi brotherhood where like all these people you know from the area, you roll around and train with them, and then oh yeah, cool, let's take a picture, and you know all these people in because you all have something in common.
yeah, you know. And back
The
to just training with all you guys, the Wolves, right? The jiu-jitsu, a bunch of you guys were just way higher level than the rest of us, right? and that's what kept the rest of us so sharp. Like, if they didn't, you know, if they couldn't mess with you guys, don't even think, because you guys were killing us every day, you know. And so it was just, I don't know. I felt like I got lucky with Sosa, and I felt like I got lucky training with all you guys.
Yeah, I actually never really wanted to fight MMA. Jim just
I know.
kept
I
tricking me.
think El
He just
didn't
kept
want you
tricking
either.
me. Yeah, he just kept tricking me into taking fights. He's like, Eric, come on, man. Like everyone else is gonna be on the card because we were roommates. So I'm like driving home. He's like, you're gonna have to go to the training anyway. You might as well just take a fight, man. Like just talking the whole time, and I'm like, bro, if I take a fight, will you shut up and let me drive? He's like, yeah, all right, cool, let's go. And then like, then it just became like, hey, if we're all doing it, then I'll do it. I'm in.
Right.
And so it would be like me and Elle looking at each other like, all right, so we're both gonna do it. And he's like, yeah, all right. All right, so since we're all doing it, okay, put us all there. We're all do it, and that's why like the cards we were on, it was like 10 of us all
Right.
fighting on the same card,
Yeah.
and there was a card where we went 10-0, like we beat everybody. It was that's still like one of the greatest nights of my life, still to this day. Like oh,
We
we
had some good nights, some good training sessions, some good MMA events, and then seeing what Mitch has done with Combat Night since. I mean, he's killing it right now. So
yeah, I mean
that's another good thing I think about our friend group is, again, seeing everybody's talent and going in different ways, the success you've had, seeing you, and then seeing everybody start their family and kind of moving into that next phase of manlyhood, or what it is to be a man, right? So yeah, it's been a pretty awesome ride so far. Oh, back to the knife stuff. Finding my mentor in the knife game, that helped me a bunch, right? So like this guy was, a bunch of his designs were like, you could get them at Walmart's, you could get them at Bass Pro Shops, and he had these deals, and I had never heard of this before. It's like, you can get paid for your knife designs? It's like, yeah, that's where I make, you know, a good portion of my money is royalties on my knife designs. And I was like, well, I draw knives all the time, right? Like if you go
yeah,
through all my papers, like I was always into drawing, always into the fantasy stuff. And like I said, playing video games, I was always in the games like a blacksmith of some sort, like making something. And so once decided I was going to try to do this shit real life, I found that mentor, and man, I got like a knife deal with a production company, so I got a similar deal to him, with this knife company called Kaiser.
oh
And
nice.
they have here,
Shout out to Kaiser.
Kaiser, yep. So they ended up doing my little butcher design.
I remember that.
So this is like the production one. This is a custom one I do. Check.
Oh wow.
So yeah,
Yeah,
this
that's
has been like
badass.
my new rabbit hole, right? Like diving into jiu-jitsu, you know as well as me, that's a huge rabbit hole. You could just dive in there and try to get better and improve and try new things, and I've been kind of doing that with the knife stuff and really trying to push myself. Because there is guys out there that they just get really, really good at one thing, even as something as simple as knife making, and then they're able to do that, right?
Yeah.
That's what my mentor does, right? Like that's all he does. He makes knives from his garage, and he has these deals and has passive income, and just does what he wants, makes what he wants.
Man, that's awesome.
But
It is awesome too that you found something else that you're passionate about that like you've been able to parlay into some passive income and still like be creative. I think it's important that like 'cause sometimes we'll get lost in like the minutia of the day to day and just like as
right,
men like we're providers, we're meant or we're supposed to be non-emotional, we're supposed to not I don't give a fuck or I don't care about things, and it's cool that you were able to find something that you care about that stills not only like just generally speaking knife making overall pretty badass, but just that like all in all you're still able to have your creative juices flowing and still do all those things, and it's cool especially that like you have a normal job that still kind of allows you the opportunity to do that stuff on the side.
Yeah, like I feel like I found a good balance with it right now. Right, I have one foot in order and one foot in chaos. I feel like, so like the firewall stuff takes care of my responsibilities, right? And then, but it gives me the time to pursue something else. And the one thing I found out is like whatever I spend my time on, I know I can get good at, right? And then the question becomes, okay, well, what do I want to spend my time on? And then it's, well, what piques your interest? This, I just started going down that path, and started, we talk about the muse, start trying to listen to that and go down that path and see how far I can take it. And it pushes me, right? Like when, I don't know, just trying to perfect something and to try to build something, it pushes you to just get out of your normal everyday slump, right? Like I can just be done after work when I'm doing all the firewall stuff, but there's something else in me. And where Jordan Peterson would say, like, you need to find a purpose to the tragedy of life, right? Something that's worth the tragedy, right? Because, we're all getting older too, right? Everybody deals with ups and downs, family members come and go, friends come and go. And there is a tragedy to life. But the key is if you can find a purpose that combats the tragedy, right? So, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, man.
Man, and it's just that's awesome, and it's so true. Like that's the thing I always told people as like, especially as like our like jujitsu guy. Like I always told people, hey man, jujitsu is whatever you want to make it. I'm like, if you look at that guy, and I would point at L, I'm like, me and him do this in a completely different way, and we both do it pretty well. But our styles are completely different, and just if you train hard enough, and if you keep training, it's one of those things where like eventually you'll be able to do it. Like eventually you'll be, if you want to be a high level black belt, you can be. It really doesn't matter what age you start. I mean, if you're still physically able, you'll be able to do it. And so, like when you when you said that about, hey, whatever I give my time to, I know I'll be good at. That's so true. And I always thought like that I was naturally good at jiu-jitsu. It wasn't that. I was obsessed with jiu-jitsu. I consumed it. It was everything I wanted to do. I didn't want to do MMA. I just wanted to do jiu-jitsu. So like, and I just wanted more excuses to do jiu-jitsu with my friends. And so, if we're in an MMA fight, really, I'm just waiting for us to get to do jiu-jitsu. Like,
Yeah.
as soon as I can
Well,
get it to do jiu-jitsu, I'm good.
that's why I wanted to do MMA, because I first came into all of it from jiu-jitsu. But I wanted to know, is this shit going to work if somebody's trying to punch me in the face? Like
Yeah.
how is this in a real high stress situation? And yeah, I fell in love with jiu-jitsu as well. And just like you said, you followed whatever that was, that intuition, and that's the call to adventure. That's the call to the adventure of your life. And it taught us a bunch too, right? Like that's the other thing, right? Jordan Peterson talks about the meek, or where in the Bible it says the meek shall inherit the earth. But when you go through the different translations, it's something more like those who have swords but keep them sheathed shall inherit the earth, right? So if you can't go there, right? If you can't go to a sword, what a sword meant for me was a knight or a warrior, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that capacity, right, then it's not really, courageous, or you're not really being,
Yeah, I think Jordan
right?
Peterson said he's like, a man shouldn't be violent, but he should be capable of it.
Right, and
Because
that's
there's no fruit in you being nonviolent if you're not even capable of it. It wasn't an option for you. You never had the choice. There's humility, and your character is shown when you have the capability or you have the option to choose violence and you decide not to.
right.
That's where real growth is. That's what being a man really is hey, I have the option to be violent, but I choose not to be. That's real strength.
And that's why I enjoy the journey we all kind of had, because I know, and I haven't even asked you this, but I can, I'm just guessing that it did. Like the confidence and the things that jiu-jitsu did for you helped you in your career in different situations, probably more. Like people don't realize the confidence, the different things that happen when like deep down inside, like
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want right now, but
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times. I mean, even recently, there was a situation with, an employee that we had that was cleaning cars in detail, and I had an altercation with him, and I was like, "Look, you know me as a completely different person." I'm like, but if you decide to get physical, because that's kind of what he was like, the angle he was
implying,
taking was, oh,
yeah,
I can, and he was a bigger dude. He was about probably 6'2". He had about 2 inches on me and probably 20 pounds. And I was like, man, you don't understand that I throw guys like you around
yeah,
all
it's
the
not
time.
enough.
Like, someone needs a. I am not the one. You would have been right about anyone else in this store except for me. I'm the one guy in the store that you don't want these problems with. And I just like having that confidence, not only in that situation, but literally in day to day situations. Like, even like I'm in in automotive sales. So like there's an obvious tension that like there sometimes is when you're negotiating, right?
Right.
And, you know, the guy could be 6'5" and arguing about something, and like some people would just get intimidated by stature or tone or whatever, and like that never crosses my mind. Like it's never a problem. I mean, I've
And
and
like I
it's
said,
because I've had to throw down with guys that, by all intents and purposes, like are
and you've
are
had that, and
heavyweights.
that's why I've enjoyed that part of my path, and all of us, right? We've all had that. We've all been there. We all know what we're capable of. But one of the good things about our friend group is I think we all been successful in our own ways too, right? Like seeing everybody kind of branch out. A bunch of you guys went into the car sales and kind of just took that over.
Yeah,
Around,
and just that the whole MMA and jiu-jitsu kind of, parlayed into that and being competitive, and like that really, I think what it does is it proves your point again. Like whatever you give your time to, you'll be great at. It's just a matter of you really giving your time. And we knew that training and through training got us to a certain level, so all we did was apply it to something else. And then look, even guys that didn't go into sales, but you have Juan with his engineering firm, and in his own right, massive weight loss. You have Mitchell that took. Look, Combat Night was going to be fine regardless, but he's done some incredible things with that business. I mean,
crazy stuff.
I remember when he first came to Orlando, like, and it was just like a Tallahassee kind of thing, and I mean, I don't think there's an argument if it's not the UFC or Bellator in Florida, it's Combat Night. That's the order of things, and it's purely because of him and his grind and his hustle, and he's the epitome of what we've been talking about too, and just you with now knife making and honestly baby making, because oh man, you guys are like rabbits in that household, bro. Like, whoo, whoo, whoo.
Yeah. Got number 4 on the way, so that's definitely going to be interesting, and
Congrats.
another interesting stage of my life, another chapter in the book that should be interesting. So,
Nice.
but yeah, man, it's been so far been one hell of a ride, and like I said, seeing all of you guys have all your successes, it just shows me that thing we've been talking about as well. It's like once you kind of figure out how to get good at something, I've seen you guys all kind of do that.
Yeah, you can just, if you take those same I want to say
Principles.
applications or, yeah, principles, and apply them to X, you'll get similar results. If you can get to a high level in one thing, you can get to it in anything. I think that's kind of why, like, you have all these people that bet on guys like Elon Musk, right? Because they're like, oh, he's done it a couple times already. Why wouldn't he be able to do it again? It's like
Yeah.
he's
Well,
already done
that's
it.
like I heard listened to another podcast. Podcasts, obviously, we're doing one right now, have been my favorite thing, especially with the knife making. Like, I'll just sit down and be working on this thing, grinding it or whatever, and just listening to podcasts. But this guy was a value investor, much like Warren Buffett, learned that whole basically learned that whole methodology of investing, right? You're not investing on the market number, you're investing in intrinsic value in the company. And then when you hear this guy talk about it, it's something like what we're talking about. You're finding individuals that solve problems for people and do it at a high level. And then that's what you bet on. And then it's kind of like he started realizing what he was searching for was truth, really.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to everything else. And, you know, Jordan Peterson brings it back to the Christian side of things and where that comes from as well. But yeah, it's like that truth or the natural order in all things. So that's the key, right? We're all trying to find that and try to figure it out, but it's not easy.
So what is the next thing that your next project or individual knife that you might be working on? What do you have coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, man. So really, I'm trying to get better at folders, right? So
Okay.
I've made like fixed blades. I got a bunch of stuff here. I can show you.
Wow.
I've been working on fixed blades for a while, so I got those down. But figuring out folders was a whole nother deal. And that mentor, he really helped me out. And this is what I got. So I'm working on one.
That almost looks like the shark tooth that you.
Yeah.
It's nice. I like that.
Just with royalties and what most knives people carry. Most people carry folders, even myself included. Like I have a folder I carry all the time. So if you want to get anywhere with royalties and having companies look at your designs, you have to come out with custom folders.
A folder.
Yep, folder design. So I've kind of just been diving into that. I've still been doing more of the fixed blades, some fun little designs.
Nice.
But the real thing I
Very
want to dive
cool.
into is folders and have. See some of my other. This is a new design I'm working on right now. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, when I'm not doing firewall stuff or crypto stuff, I'll start just diving into the knife stuff, and that's what I'm doing now. I've gone to Blade Show every year, but just like you mentioned, I have a new one, a new baby coming, and his due date is on Blade Show, so I'm probably not going to make it this year.
Yeah, do
But
not
I
do
still
that to
want
Jeff.
yeah, no, definitely not going to make it this year.
No.
But I still want to make a bunch of stuff as if I'm making, again, just pushing myself, because this deal that I got and some of these the things that have helped me in the knife making happened going to that Blade Show. That's like the biggest knife show in the world. People all over the world are there, including these companies. So I want to have some of my designs still there, and that's what I'm pushing for. But,
Very cool. Well,
so
man,
what's new with you, man? What's been going on? I see this podcast. I watched a couple of them before this one. You know.
Yeah, I'm just like anything, what you said, trying to, put my time into different things. What honestly started this was I listened to a podcast on the way to work, and there was a comedian. He was either on like Ryan Pineda's real estate podcast or on PBD's podcast. I'm not sure which one. And he said like that he basically records his phone calls with his dad. And, when his dad passed away, it was all he had. And it, like, kind of got me thinking. I'm like, I have two young boys. And, God forbid, knock on wood, like, I don't want anything to happen to me. But I would like that no matter what, them have a record of me, right? Like, hey, this is what my dad was. And that's why I talk about, like, how I want them raised and how I want them to be, and the world that they're coming in and how to prepare for it. Because, like, really what I want this to be is like a diary to them. Like, my cousin interviews a lot of baseball players, and we're doing the podcast together. And, he's deep into baseball, and he was a professional baseball player, and, still kind of is. But all things being equal, like, for me, that's what this podcast, if I don't make a dime off of it ever, I'm cool. I just want them to I want Junior and Abram to be able to look at this and, have an idea, or, have something of their dad tangible, because, like, I'm going to leave them real estate, I'm going to leave them money, I'm going to leave them all that, but the boys that I'm raising, I know, won't care about that, really. I mean, it'd be nice, but what they're really going to want to know is, like, who their dad was and what he stood for. And that's the other reason why I keep interviewing my friends, too, because, like, you guys are just as important to my story as I am. So, like, the type of people that I had around me that I wanted to keep around me. Because, right, like, when we met each other at Gracie Baja, right, and there was 200 some odd students. When we trained together at Alliance, there was 300, and then when we formed our own gym, like, it was the core group. And so, I was an instructor at a lot of those places. So, like, theoretically, like, the group of guys that I had around me, I could have picked out of any number. Like, there were people, and even guys that I'm cool with, like Pedro Torres. I love that kid. He's a cool dude. He wasn't in my core group, and it was nothing against him at all. But it wasn't just because of jiu-jitsu, because, like, he was one of the better jiu-jitsu guys in our gym. But that connection just wasn't there. Whereas, like, I had that connection with you. So, like, that's what I really want them to get to, is, like, hey, who you're surrounding yourself with is a reflection of who you are. And if you look at, like, our core group and what a lot of them represent, like, we all bust our ass, we all work hard, we're all just good dudes trying to do our best out there, man. And that's realistically, like, hey, Abram Jr., I need you to surround yourselves with those. They might not be knights, but they need to want to be knights. And
Yeah, that's
look,
like
when I met you, I wasn't a
the
knight.
same thing, right? Like, it's that old adage: "Show me your friends, I'll show you your future." Right? If you don't have guys that are pushing themselves for whatever it is, right? We've seen all our friends kind of go off in different ways, but if you don't have those type of guys around you, they don't push you either, right? Like, a lot of those, and you brought up Juan too, right? Like, seeing him lose weight, I'm like, all right, I can't let Juan get skinnier than me now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
A little bit.
I have to, yeah.
So we're always kind of doing that with each other, right? Iron sharpens iron. And
For sure.
I feel that too. I had my little YouTube channel there, Life is Eddie, back in the day, and even now, my kids, my youngest, she'll watch our episodes and say different things. And then what I've noticed is there's stuff I've totally forgotten, not in any memory bank. That you're like, what? When did we do this? And you look, and sure enough, there's a video, and it's so cool to document different things that way. Because some of those memories, this is really the only way you're going to have them like that. So that's pretty awesome that you're doing that for them.
Yeah, man. But other than that, just real estate. And, obviously I'm in the automotive business, so that takes up a lot of my time. But, man, I all in on real estate of all different types. I have a couple multifamilies, a couple single families.
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm actually converting a couple units because most of my stuff is near, like, the region I live at,
Okay.
which is the Panhandle area, Navarre, Fort Walton Beach. So obviously is a very high tourism area, and I've been using analytics to,
Probably.
yeah, I've been using analytics to see, like, hey, if during this tourism season, if I could actually make more money doing short-term rentals than long-term rentals, even though, man, I've been blessed with my long-term rentals. Like, I haven't had any issues, and they've kind of just been on autopilot. But we're converting a couple of our units to short-term Airbnbs, and so that we're in the middle of that
Awesome.
project right now. So
So what
I'm
got you
hoping
into
to
it?
list. I'm hoping to list by March 1st because spring break is the second week in March, so
Uh-huh.
it should pop off. Honestly, just probably on Ryan Pineda's podcast, they had this guy that was about Airbnbs, and then just doing more and more research about it and kind of going deep down rabbit holes and just deciding like, hey, I got to at least try and see what it looks like and see what it does. And if anything, all I lose is some time and some money. But then I know, like so much of what we do, like when we put money in a 401k or an IRA, we're letting other people play with our money and just hoping that it works out. And in my head, I'm like, well, look, I've been in meetings with CEOs. I've been in meetings with billionaires, and what I've noticed is they're not any more intelligent or unintelligent than I am. Like they're normal dudes that just what they are good at is just making a decision and executing. Like so much of what we think about is like we have to have this amazing idea when realistically, man, and it's present in used cars, speed kills. If you can get a used car through the reconditioning process, merchandise, and online in a quick manner, you're going to sell the used car. It's speed, 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 and it's the same thing in normal business. It's a reflection of that. Just like in jiu-jitsu, speed kills. Like Bruno would kill us at times because you'd lose track of him. He was so fast. Right? Like it's true. I've never rolled with anyone else that like I would literally lose track of. There was times where like, yeah, Jim was fast, but I knew where he was. I knew where he went.
Bruno's
There
like
were times where I'm like,
around.
fuck, where did Bruno go? And it's the same thing in business though. Like the time that you can take from idea to implementation to like cost segregating, that speed, if you can move in that speed in a fast direction, you're gonna win. Even if, like, because just like in jiu-jitsu, if you're moving fast, even if you move the wrong direction, sometimes even that'll work out. Like, hey, that wasn't supposed to work, but it worked. It's the same thing. Like, hey, whenever like someone puts too much money in a used car, I go, hey, move to that car goes to the front of the line of service. Recondition it right away. I'll have that thing pictured and online tomorrow. And it never kills us because of that. Because it's the speed that makes up for everything else. It's speed, speed, speed. So it's just like in normal business. If you can do something, go from idea to execution to monetization and that quick, you're going to win. And these guys that have a lot of money, because they have a lot of money to throw around, they can do that fast. It's the small fish like me that like I got to do a lot of things myself, and I have my normal job, and I have my kids to raise, and I have this that
I mean,
slow it
you're
down.
doing all this and gaining experience, and that's what a lot of those guys, some of the older guys, have. Right? There's nothing that can replace that experience, and you only get that by trying. So, I think that's pretty awesome. Now, one of the going back to like value and that value investor, hearing what he invested in and what he's ultimately investing in now kind of just goes back to what you're talking about in land, right? So this is funny, right? I'm the crypto guy, but finding what true value is even in land, this guy went away from value investing in stocks and all that to now he's just into commodities. So he found out like, oh, everybody's going to electric cars. What are the raw commodities on the periodic table of elements that are needed to make those cars? And he says it's something about, again, the raw physical goods, land. So what he would do is just buy land with these goods on them. So, yeah, I think I'm coming from the crypto side where that's like totally separate, right? Everything's ethereal. But hearing this, the counter argument, and it's almost like the common sense, right? But I see it, right? Land is, I've had, I sold one house, a house that I had previously. That was one of my best investments, just land and what I made from it. So there's something to that, right? And you're diving in on that, and you're learning a bunch of shit. So there's probably a couple things that you would do differently now when you go to look to buy something. Like, what's your next thing that you want to buy? What's your next step that you want to go up?
Apartment building probably. I've done a couple single families, not including my own personal homes. I've done like the duplex things. I bought 2 duplexes last year. And what I realized is, do you know what the difference between like buying a duplex or buying 2 duplexes at once compared to buying like one home at once?
Mm-mm.
There's no difference. It's all the same things. It's the same inspection. It's the same appraisal. It's the same as the same as the same. So like, and the more I've looked into it, do you know what the difference when you buy an apartment is? It's the same. Like, I used a DSR loan to buy our duplexes, which means that the rental income from said duplexes was the proof of income for that qualifies you for the loan. Like, hey, it'll pay for itself. And the reason why I could apply for a loan like that is because I was already designated as a real estate professional because I had been buying investment properties for a few years already. So it's one of the things cool. Like, it's just like I said, speed to implementation, right? Like, hey, you don't have to check with my employer. Hey, you don't have to check, my income. You just need proof that I could pay this down payment and we're good. So an apartment building, I can do the same thing. There, as long as I can buy it at a value and negotiate the terms. But the bigger the unit, like how many, when you're looking at a single family home, like yeah, there's a lot of people that are trying to buy it, right? Because people are trying to live there. When you're looking at a duplex, like yeah, there's still people that are going to try and buy to live there, and still other people. When you're looking at an apartment building, that pool of people is way smaller. And especially like right now with how the market is, like these big investment firms like Blackstone and all that, they're not looking to buy houses. So now like those were the competitors that you used to have, even buying single family homes, like was like a BlackRock coming in and deciding to buy half of the zip code. Those guys are out right now. It's a bear market. So now's the time to buy. And these guys that, are look, scare money don't make money. And I know that like interest rates and terms aren't the best, but by all intents and purposes, if I have the money and I could then theoretically have a commodity pay for itself,
Yeah,
why
it's pretty
wouldn't
cool.
I?
So you can show what the current, I guess, income is, net or gross or whatever, and then use that as what is it, the collateral for the loan?
Yeah, so like let's say when you buy a house on a normal mortgage, you have to get like your pay stubs together and your tax returns and your bank statements, right? And give that to them, and the lender basically is proving a capacity for you to pay the loan, right? On a DSR loan, hey, the rental income that I can prove because this thing has been rented out at X amount can pay the loan that you're then giving me.
Yep.
So
Okay.
what it does is, and it's the same in automotive lending. What lenders are trying to figure out is the risk. Like
Right.
everyone thinks, like oh, like your credit score. Yes, your credit score is something, but the risk depends on the collateral, and your risk also depends on your income, right? Like, hey, you shouldn't. They wouldn't want to give me or my LLC another loan if they didn't think I could have the capacity to pay said loan back, right? Which is why like the '08 bubble was so bad because no one was checking income or checking anything. So they were just like, hey, yeah, you got a good score, you're approved, you're approved, you're approved, you're approved. So like they were just willy nilly giving money away. Whereas like now, like what I would have to do is if I wasn't using a DSR type product, I would have to show that I could pay for this apartment building. So like on the single family homes,
So
I
when you
basically
said
just
DSR,
use.
what does that mean? What's that acronym?
I don't actually know what the acronym stands for, but I do know that it is for like real estate professionals. So you have to prove that you've been a real estate professional to some form of capacity for 2 years, I believe, and the income that you can use to prove your capacity to pay back the debt can be the very rental income that you'll be getting from said property.
Right. Yeah, that seems like that's like the Grant Cardone model, right? Like he just has all these fucking giant apartment buildings, and then that cash flow is where it's all at. They always talk about, right? Like once you have something
Hmm.
that big, that constant cash flow is actually more important than um, anything else.
Well, Grant, actually, I was listening to him on a podcast, and he said something that like, and it like clicked for me. He's like, "Let me ask you a question. Do you think that things are going to be cheaper or more expensive in the future?" And the host was like, "Oh, everything's gonna be more expensive. Just, historically based, like inflation is still going on right now, so everything's
Right.
gonna be more expensive." He's like, "So let me ask you a question. If everything's getting more expensive, why is it a bad time to buy?" I'm like, and it left the host shook. It left me shook as I'm driving my car to work, and that's why I started buying like these rental properties in 2019, and everyone thought they were high. And then 2020, everyone was like, "Oh, this is so expensive," and then 2021, "Oh, it's so expensive." But it's just like analysis paralysis. If I would have kept thinking about it and never done it, like I would still not have. I know people that were in my business in the same position of me, not only financially, but literally in my same like job position, making the same money as me almost exactly. And us talking about it, me saying like, "Hey, I'm gonna instead of buying a boat, or instead of buying $100,000 car, instead of buying this, I'm gonna buy something that when my kids are older and we talk to them about this period of inflation where everyone was making all this money, like 1920s, this Great Gatsby time, right, type deal, that I can say, hey, instead of buying all that stuff, what I did was I secured our future, right? And then the friend group that I have here, all of them were like, yeah, me too, I'm down. But no one else executed it. Like if like there was a group of like 4 or 5 of us, because we're the automotive group I'm with has about 15 stores. Most of them are actually in this area. So even though I'm managing one, my friend manages a Kia store. My other friend's at this Chrysler store. It's like so we know each other.
Right.
And instead, I saw them buy like an $80,000 boat, or I saw him buy a house on the beach for himself. Like where I stayed in the same house the whole time. And don't get me wrong, like I spent money. Like I had nice dinners, we went on nice vacations, whatever my boys needed, like they got. But by all intents and purposes, if I don't ever make this type of money again, at the very least I can look them in the eye and say, hey, I know that we're not millionaires, but in about 10 years when the rest of these things are paid off, we're going to be cash flowing everything. Right? Like I was able to buy some things too on the cheap because they were kind of terrible situations up front. Like I had a tenant that was locked into a 2-year lease that these people had signed, and then the husband and wife got divorced, and the tenants were in there way below market value. I mean, they were renting a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with 2 different living rooms, and I think their rent was like $1,300, and it's a 2,400 square foot house. Like by all intents and purposes, it should be renting for what it is right now, $2,400. But it was locked in. They still had a year and 8 months on their lease. So anyone looking to try and buy it to live in, that's a no go because you can't move in for a year and 8 months. Any investors looking at it, and they're like, this shit won't cash flow for a year and 8 months. Like the ROI is not there. But I'm sitting there thinking, well, now I can negotiate, and I don't need the money right now. Like, thankfully, like I work, I don't need the money. So for me, it made more sense for value. So I was able to buy that at value, and ironically, in September, the 8 months was up, and I was able to raise it to market value. And so, like, I had put down enough money to get it to just kind of triple net, where it's paying for itself.
Right.
And so now it's making money, and it's just and when I look at like my total debt, like I bought a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house that's about 2,400 square feet for 275. Like new roof, updated floors, like for all intents, it's a $300,000-400,000 house, and I bought it for 275 in a crazy market. And just theoretically, I think right now I owe like 190, 180 on it. So there's going to be times where like, hey, I still got 15 years left on that, but in 15 years the boys will be 19. All right.
There you go. And having that cash flow for when you want to just enjoy your life with your wife, when the boys are older, and then you're doing your thing, right? I think that's pretty awesome, man. And going down that road and looking at, you know, what you want to invest in and learning all those things. I know you're going to be killing it just like you do with everything else. You did Jiu Jitsu, you took that all the way to black belt, and you know what you're doing with the real estate. I can't imagine where you're going to be in another 10 years. You're going to be telling me about all your apartments you got.
Yeah, I think that's the like my biggest fault is I can't turn it off. Like I only have one speed and it's fifth gear. So like I remember my wife was like, "Hey, so this year like let's just, let's slow down." We bought like cuz she worries about stuff. Like she's like my perfect antithesis because like she helps if it were up to me like I'd be going 100 miles an hour. And so
She's just
she
putting in
helps.
order.
Yeah, she helps slow me down, and I need to be slowed down. So by all intents and purposes, like I remember she was, "Hey, let's, this year let's kind of relax." And then, then I bought two duplexes, uh, like 2 months later, and she just looked at me. She's like, "There's what the hell?"
You thank me later. You thank me
I'm
later.
like, it makes sense, and now like part of those duplexes are part of the Airbnb conversions that she has her hands kind of wrapped around like the decorating and all that stuff, and like it's fun
Nice.
to see her like excited about that because it's kind of like her way into like kind of the world I've started building
Yeah,
for
that's something you
us,
guys
right?
can
Like,
kind of do together, right?
yeah. She was
That's
like,
cool.
"Oh, do you want any input on decorating?" I was like, "How many TVs are we buying? Can I
That's it.
trade out these TVs for those TVs?" Like I don't care about the decorations aren't my thing. I'm like, hey, we're in a beach town, just make it beachy. Like make it beachy, and I'm cool. So, but yeah, I mean that's all the stuff I got going on, real estate wise, and then I got the Diamond Strong podcast and work, and that's it,
And how have you been enjoying this? Right, it's been cool. Probably just
bro. This
diving in,
is
hearing everybody's stories, right? A little more in
yeah,
depth.
this is fun. Like for me, this is just fun. Like getting to hear everyone's stories, and getting to hear other people's stories. Honestly, like I just think it's one of the coolest things because like the podcast setup in general, I feel like you just get way more personal and you get people's like real stories or real opinions or real like
Right.
and and the messaging that you can get from it, I just feel is so strong. So, I think what's gonna probably end up happening is because like with everything, I gotta take it all the way. Is after I run through all our friend group, then I'm just gonna try and like reach out to people that I want to talk to, just off my interest, and see if how crazy I can get. Like, if I can get some big names on here and just go from there. I think we have some that you probably know that are pretty big names that will come on, and then I think we have some that like from the baseball world and that area that might surprise you too that are in the works. So if you see a
Nice.
couple of names like that you recognize, like hit like and follow because
There you
there's
go.
some that are coming through that I think is going to surprise some people.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, you have another outlet, another creative outlet, and another outlet to learn and put some positive time into. You know, so
Yeah, for sure. Hey man, thank you so much for your time. This was great, honestly.
yeah, man, I
This was
appreciate it. It was
amazing.
fun catching up and kind of diving into a bunch of the topics. And yeah, thanks, man.
For sure.